Between a lingering knee issue with Starling Marte and another rough start by Tylor Megill, could we see some changes to the Mets roster soon? I'll talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Has Tylor Megill pitched himself out of the Mets rotation? This is not something I was expecting to talk about, but man, it was a brutal start. Megill in the first inning, he walks two of the first three batters that he faced, and then he gives up a base hit that scores one, a ground out scores another, so now it's 2-0 Cubs, and he had a chance. If he gets a third out there, he can escape, and maybe it's your typical Tylor Megill start from this year, where he gets through 5 innings, gives up 2 or 3 earned runs, and you don't look at it as some horrible start. But Megill did not get out of the first inning. He then gives up a 2-out single. That scored a 3rd run, then 2-out double. That scored a 4th run, then a triple. That scored a 5th run. So 5-0 Cubs before the game even really gets going. And then he also hung a sweeper to Christopher Morel for a 6th run allowed. He had some strikeouts mixed in there, 6 strikeouts in 3 innings pitched, but 3 innings pitched. So a really bad start for Megill, his worst of the year. And now you look at his stats on the season. He's got a 4.81 ERA through 7 starts. Obviously, this one where you only go 3 and you give up 6, that's going to inflate your ERA by a large margin. But if you look at his career stats, Tylor Megill has a 4.73 ERA. You look at his whip right now, it's at 1.43. That is walks and hits over innings pitched. His career whip, 1.42. So now you got a 7-start sample size, and Tylor Megill is sitting right at his career numbers, basically. Now, I will acknowledge he has more strikeouts this year as far as a strikeout rate than he ever has before. This stuff does look better in spurts, but he's not putting it all together, which is why there's still part of me that thinks, man, could Tylor Megill just be an elite reliever? Could that end up being the thing where instead of throwing 95, 96 in the rotation, now he's pumping 97, 98, and he's still getting swing and miss, and he's actually more effective? I don't really know what the direction is, but Jose Butto was removed from this rotation for doing less. I mean, he was removed because he was walking guys, and also it was at just a point where you were, if I remember correctly, what was that when Megill came back or when Scott came into the fold? I can't remember exactly what sent Butto down, but it was something along the lines of the Mets needed another arm, and Butto was sort of the casualty because he had just pitched and he had the optionality. So now you look at Butto's 7-start appearance with the Mets this year, a 7-start stint compared to Megill's. Jose Butto had a 3.08 ERA and a 1.13 whip. That's significantly better than what the Mets have gotten out of Tylor Megill. Jose Butto gave the Mets 6 innings in 3 of his 7 starts and made it through at least 5 in 6 of his 7 starts. Tylor Megill has 1 start where he went 6. He actually went 7. And then other than that, he's failed to go through 5 in 3 different appearances out of his 7 starts. Jose Butto, since going to AAA, he had 1 really bad start. We got tagged for like 7 runs. His other 5 starts, he's allowed just 4 runs across the other 5 starts. That's in 28 and 2/3 innings pitch. So across a 5-start span, 1.26 ERA. Now, that's throwing out the clunker. So let's put that clunker back in there for his ERA since being sent down. His ERA through 6 starts in AAA, since his 7 starts in the big leagues, is at 3.06. So 3.06 ERA in AAA, 3.08 ERA in the bigs, and it's tough to pitch in that league in AAA. A lot of inflated ERAs down there. So I think Jose Butto is pretty legit, and at this point, it's hard to justify keeping Megill in this rotation when he has options. He has 2 more option years left. So you can send him down, let him work on some stuff in AAA, have him just be an arm in waiting, and you could put Butto right into that spot in the rotation. I think they should make that move. Now, getting back to this game, because we're going to talk a little bit more about the roster in the next segment, Tylor Megill is pulled after throwing 78 pitches because the heart of the lineup was due up. And at the time, the game was still close enough where Carlos Mendoza wasn't willing to sort of throw one away when your lineup has been putting up double-digit performances lately, and 6 runs didn't seem too daunting. So they go to Danny Young, who returned to the team because Sean Reed-Foley hit the IL. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next segment. But Danny Young does what Danny Young does. There's a reason why I was so upset when this guy got sent down. Faced 4 batters, retired 4 batters. And then Adrian Hauser, got to give him a lot of credit. In the mop-up duty, he spared the rest of the bullpen, so nobody else had to pitch. 3 2/3 out of him. So now in this series, if I believe correctly, because it's been 2 blowouts, we have not seen Edwin Diaz, we have not seen Reed Garrett, we have not seen Daniel Nunez, the Mets' 3 best pitchers. So with Luis Severino on the mound on Sunday, those guys all rested, you have a pretty good recipe to win a ball game. If you pitch well, get some runs on the board, the Mets should be able to handle business and take a serious victory in Chicago. Otherwise, pretty disappointing end to what started off as such a promising road trip. So we'll see what that last game brings. Offensively, it just wasn't a good day for the Mets. Francisco Alvarez provided the only run, a solo homer, his 2nd straight day with the home run. Jamison Tyone looked really good for the Cubs. He scattered 6 hits. He did not walk anyone. He struck out 10. So it was a really nice start out of him, and the Cubs bullpen was able to hold up in a lopsided game. But again, Severino going up against Javier Assad on Sunday. Going to be a really interesting game. It's Sunday Night Baseball, so that'll be a lot of fun to talk about on Monday to see what happened there. But also another note from this game, Starling Marte exited in the 2nd inning with knee soreness. So what's the latest there? If Marte goes on the IL, who's going to replace him? I'm going to talk about that. I'll touch on the rotation a little bit more with Megill, as well as Sean Reed-Foley's injury. We're talking roster moves next. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get supplies from the site that's made for skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online with their easy-to-use website, which is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business with Supply House. You talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining Supply House's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets an access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/T-M and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime some news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You get the lineup graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's going to be in the Mets starting lineup. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. So Starling Marte was removed from the game on Saturday with knee soreness. This is the same thing that has come up throughout at least the past month now, where we've seen Marte, okay, he's resting today. Why? Oh, some knee soreness. Oh, Marte was scratched from the lineup. Why? Some knee soreness. So now they're going to get this thing checked out. On Monday, he will get an MRI when the Mets are back in New York. That means they're going to play a man down on Sunday. I imagine DJ Stewart gets out there in right field. And I think that is what is going to be the short-term answer as far as who's the Mets starting right fielder with Starling Marte down. It'll be some type of a platoon where DJ Stewart is starting against right-handed pitching in right field. I think that's what we're going to see. And honestly, the crazy thing about it is Marte has been so bad defensively that Stewart's not even a step back when it comes to the defense. He doesn't have the arm that is going to really be scaring people out in right field, but he might get in on some balls that Marte hasn't been. It's still a huge loss, though, because Starling Marte has been great for this team offensively. He's been one of their top 4 or 5 hitters this year. So losing him for any period of time is going to hurt, but this is sort of the reality that you're in with this guy in his mid-30s. We knew going into the season that there was going to be some give and take here as far as how much he could play, and having the DH spot really early, I think, helped him a ton because they were able to get him off his feet, put him in the DH spot a couple times a week. Now that JD Martinez is in there every single day at DH, well, that just puts more strain on Marte's body to have to get out there and play right field. I think we could see an IL stint here, even if there is nothing glaring on the MRI. If the MRI just shows whatever, some inflammation, some scarring, whatever it is, but it's still been an issue, I could say, all right, why don't you rest it for a whole week, a week and a half, 10-day IL stint, and see what happens. And the longer you're resting it, the All-Star break, will get on you kind of quick. And so I'm not saying for sure, hey, we're not going to see Starling Marte until the All-Star break. He might be in the starting lineup on Tuesday for all we know. But I can see a world where the Mets look at their road ahead and they just decide best to shut him down for a little bit, get him healthy, and then on the other side of the break, hopefully you can get, at that point, 2.5 months of really good Starling Marte to close out your season, and then maybe he can still help you if you're able to find your way into the playoffs. So I'm not saying that's for sure what's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised at all. And so if that is the case, what is the plan? DJ Stewart and Tyrone Taylor would likely platoon in right, but Taylor has not hit well against left-handed pitching. He's hitting .216 with a .231 on base, .275 slug. He's got a .506 OPS versus lefties this year. He's been far better facing right-handed pitching. Stewart's obviously not going to start every day. He's not good against lefties. So who can come up from AAA? Well, you got Trayce Thompson, who is a righty, has 16 home runs, but he's extremely streaky, and throughout his career, he has had reverse splits. I just checked, and he also has reverse splits this season, where he hits right-handed pitching better than left. So he doesn't fit as an ideal partner to Stewart. If DJ Stewart wasn't getting the job done, I could see Thompson coming up, but I don't see Thompson getting a shot over Stewart. Even acknowledging Stewart's recent slump, he hasn't gotten playing time. So I don't think it's Trayce Thompson. Ben Gamel has been good lately. I haven't checked his splits. He is a left-handed hitter, though. So it doesn't really make sense for him to come up, although he has been the best outfielder in Syracuse this year based on his production, his slash line. So we'll see. He also was hurt recently, just came back not too long ago. You have Ryland Thomas, who's in AAA, but he just got up to AAA, was promoted from AA. I don't see that. Here are the guys that make some sense. There's Luke Ritter, who isn't a right fielder, more of an infielder, but can play some left. But what I actually see is Jeff McNeil being an outfielder while Starling Marte is down, where Jeff McNeil is getting his starts in right field. And you can even start Jeff McNeil against lefties. It's been pretty much the same left versus right this year for McNeil. It's been bad either way. But you could actually platoon Stewart and McNeil, where McNeil plays against all of the lefties in right field. Iglesias is starting at second base. I'm sure McNeil would still get some starts at second, but that could be the most realistic outcome. And Luke Ritter could then fit in at various spots, second, third, first. Guy has 16 home runs in 66 games in AAA this year with 53 RBIs. But he has a ton of strikeouts, strikeout rate close to 30%. Again, doesn't play right field and has no big league experience. So there's some doubt in my mind as to if the Mets would actually go to Ritter. The other option, Duke Ellis, they just claimed him, a speedster who's on the 40-man roster that plays the outfield, but I don't think he's going to give you much offensively. So I would hope the Mets don't go there. I think the most likely outcome if Starling Marte hits the IL is Brett Beatty comes back up. He's the guy that has got the most MLB run this year. He could help your team in multiple ways. You would see him, grab some time at third base again, of course. Mark Vientos does have some splits where he has crushed left-handed pitching. Hasn't been quite as good against righties. I still think you need Vientos in the lineup more days than not. I don't want to see him on the bench against all right-handed pitching for Brett Beatty, and I don't think he would. Instead, I think Brett Beatty would steal some starts at third. I think they would actually start him at second base a little bit, platoon him and Iglesias at second. Jeff McNeil is at right more. I think that's the move. Brett Beatty would be the first bat off the bench in games that he doesn't start. It makes the most sense for Brett Beatty to come back because he's probably the best player that could come back. And I think that's the way the Mets would ultimately lean, knowing that they have enough outfield depth with Tyrone Taylor and DJ Stewart being able to fill the void from Marte, and with Jeff McNeil being able to slide out to the outfield a lot more. Now, the one roster move that was already made, Sean Reed-Foley hit the IL with a shoulder issue, same one that was at the end of spring training that had him out and on the IL to start the season. He's been great this year, so hopefully he's back pretty soon. But for now, he's going to get a little bit of a respite here and Danny Young is back up. If Danny Young continues to pitch as well as he has, and again today, phase 4 batters retired them all, when Sean Reed-Foley is ready, I think we could finally see the Mets make a tough DFA, whether that's Drew Smith, Jake Diekman, or Adam Ottavino. I think that could be in the cards because Danny Young might be the lefty that the Mets really need to get the tough lefty out. When you're facing the Phillies or the Braves, you need someone to get out Bryce Harper, Matt Olson, whatever it is. I think that might be where you would see Danny Young have a really, really crucial role for the Mets down the stretch of the season. So we'll see what happens. I am glad to see Young up, but losing Sean Reed-Foley out to the team got better. I think they probably stayed close to the same because I really do think Danny Young is going to be that effective. Now, getting back to the rotation with Tylor Megill, I just want to talk about where the Mets are at with their schedule. So Luis Severino, as I already mentioned, will be starting on Sunday. David Peterson and Sean Manaea will start the 2-game series against the Yankees, and you have off days that are sandwiching that series. So off day on Monday, off day on Thursday. That means that Jose Quintana is going to start on Friday, I would assume, although that lines up 3 lefties in a row in your rotation. But I think they'd probably go Quintana. Then again, if they wanted to, you have Severino pitching on Sunday. You could turn him right back around and start him on Friday if you really wanted to on regular rest. Food for thought. But you'll see some combination of Severino, Quintana, and then probably Peterson in that series against the Astros. And you could just actually option Megill if you wanted to tomorrow or Sunday and add another reliever to your bullpen and go without a 5th starter for the rest of this month. You really could do that. You won't need a 5th starter until July 2nd. You could go with these 2 guys that are going to start in the Subway Series, and then they could pitch again after Quintana. That's the combination of Quintana and Severino. So after Quintana, you can go with Peterson and Manaea, and you would not need a starter until July 2nd. Now, it could be Tylor Megill, or if you option him, you have another reliever for a week, and then you could go to Jose Butto or Christian Scott. The Mets had said for the longest time that it was going to be a short stint in AAA for Christian Scott. He is definitely the best pitcher of that group because he has just the ceiling that's more than Jose Butto. So you could see Scott come back. I predicted from the beginning that we wouldn't see Christian Scott until July. It's certainly looking like that's going to be the case here. If he does come back into the rotation, though, you have a stretch that begins with the series against the Astros on Friday of 17 games in 17 days. Is Christian Scott ready to start in a 5-man rotation in the big leagues after being rested for the most part for this past month where he's been on a limited pitch count? I just don't see it. So are you going to hold Scott out for the rest of the time until the All-Star break because you need a 6-man rotation and it's hard to manage that with your bullpen? And so that would just say, all right, put Jose Butto in there. That is an option. Or are you going to go to a 6-man rotation that includes Scott and Butto, or is Megill just going to stay in their rotation and Christian Scott's going to come into the fold? Those are all the options that the Mets have here. But one that I think could happen if the Mets really want to get creative with this, they could essentially have a 5-man rotation with Christian Scott and then rely on spot starters, where if Adrian Hauser has not been used for a period of time, you go to an Adrian Hauser bullpen game where maybe you have an opener and then Hauser comes in if you want to, or you just give Hauser a spot start here and there, and that could get you through that stretch. Or the other thing the Mets could do is they could call on, let's just say Scott goes into the rotation on July 2nd. They could call on Jose Butto whenever you need that 6th starter to make a start, option whoever it is down. If it's Danny Young has an optionality, so whatever it is, and then you go back and you end up optioning Butto back down, and you cycle, and then the next time that 6th starter comes up, you can bring up Joey Lucchesi potentially. There are ways the Mets can get around it. I'm very curious what happens, and I think if Megill is going to get bounced from this rotation, we won't find out on Sunday, but we'll find out on Tuesday, and the Mets will add an arm to the bullpen, or we'll just see them make a straight flip and Christian Scott will come up or Jose Butto will come up, and we'll just know. We'll see exactly what the Mets decide to do, but there's a lot of roster maneuvering that I think will take place when the Mets get back to New York. They're going to have to make some decisions on Starling Marte and potentially on their rotation as they face the Yankees and then a stretch against some bad teams, but still a grueling stretch nonetheless of 17 games in 17 days before the All-Star break. And those 17 games will probably decide the Mets' fate at the deadline. So a lot in store. Now, before we close the show today, I promised a farm report, so I'm going to touch on all of the top pitching prospects in the system in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Tax Network USA. Here with Locked On Mets, we pride ourselves on giving you your daily coverage all year round. You know what else is year round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes or if you're like me and you have complicated matters that require tax planning, because I'm self-employed, so tax season always a little bit rough. It's just great to talk to a licensed professional that can give you really good advice, point you in the right direction, help you file your taxes correctly and save money. Call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. You can also just see the link in this episode description below. There will be a Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Finals. If you want to be up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, make sure you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. Now, let's go through all the different levels of the Mets system and talk about some pitchers, the top pitching prospects in this system. Blade Tidwell. I imagine he starts on Sunday because we haven't seen him since last Sunday, June 16th. He went 4 innings, allowed 3 runs, his second start with that line. ERA, I think, has gone north of 5 now in AAA. It's tough to pitch there. It really is. Unless you're Christian Scott, who has had no problem in AAA. You see Blade Tidwell, Dom Hamill, Mike Vasil. They've all struggled in AAA after having great success in AA. So Tidwell is obviously the best of those 3 pitching prospects, and he did have early success. Now he's going through a little bit, but I think he's in the right place for the rest of this season. I don't think we'll see Blade Tidwell this year, but next year, Blade Tidwell certainly could be an impact pitcher for the Mets, and he is getting the development he needs against some really tough competition in AAA right now. Meanwhile, Dom Hamill had another clunker, so he's still struggling, ERA north of 6. Mike Vasil has been better as of late, but still not great. He allowed 2 runs in a start this week over 5 innings pitched, but gave up 8 hits in those 5 innings. Now, the depth that the Mets have right now in AAA, in my opinion, for this season, it's Christian Scott, Jose Butto, and Joey Lucchesi. Those are the guys. I also will note that Mike Puma reported that the New York Mets could consider trading some of their starters at the deadline while still trying to contend. Why would they do that? What would that mean? Well, because they have Scott, Butto, and Lucchesi, as well as Kodai Senga, who's going to face live batters this week. I can't remember the day. I think it might be Wednesday. Regardless, he's going to have an inning of live BP. That goes well. I imagine he might get a rehab assignment at some point soon. I still don't expect to see him until probably August, but he could be ready right around the deadline where you feel confident knowing, all right, Kodai Senga has a clean bill of health. He's going to be our ace. He's going to be our big addition. And I know people hate that. That's very Wilpon thinking, oh, the guy that's injured is the big trade deadline acquisition. But sometimes that proves to be the case. So we'll see what happens with Senga. But because of that depth the Mets have, they could trade a Sean Manaea or a Jose Quintana, backfill in with a Butto and be fine, or a Butto and Lucchesi. The one guy, if you're actually contending, that I don't think you trade is Severino. Now, Severino will probably get you the best package, but if the Mets are in the mix, you need Luis Severino in your rotation, because if you want any shot at being that surprise team with the Diamondbacks last year, that is the just everything clicked at the right time team, you need Severino as part of your playoff rotation if you're fortunate enough to get that far. And you always can tag him with a qualifying offer, which if he accepted, fine, good pitcher on a 1-year deal. And if he keeps this up throughout the rest of the season, he probably wouldn't accept it. And then you get some draft pick compensation when he signs elsewhere. So I think that's probably the guy that would be off limits if the Mets were in that weird buy-sell situation. Now let's move back to the prospects. Double A, big injury return to talk about. Bryce Montes de Aca. 1 inning pitch tonight, I believe. 2 strikeouts, 12 pitches, 9 strikes. If you remember, Montes de Aca got Tommy John surgery. He was very close to the big leagues when he did. Guy that was, at the time, touching 101, 102 with a heavy, heavy sinker. So we'll see. We'll see if Montes de Aca is what he was. I'm sure we're going to see plenty of minor league appearances before he could come up this year. But that is a name to keep in your back pocket that could have a big impact down the stretch this season if everything goes right as he is still building himself back up after Tommy John. Also in Double A, the starting pitchers, you got Joander Suarez had a great start this week. 7 innings pitched, 1 earned run. He had been struggling a little bit lately, so his season ERA is 4.39. So good to see him get back on track. Tyler Stewart, 5 innings pitched, 2 earned runs, has a 4.89 ERA in the season. So he has not been quite what he was last year. Definitely at the level he should be, getting challenged a lot. We'll see if he can turn things around a little bit as the season continues to wear on in Binghamton. Noel McLean had a brutal start this week. 2 1/3, gave up 5 runs. McLean is the two-way player the Mets have. Talked about him on yesterday's show when I was doing the farm report for the position player side, where he's hit 2 home runs in his 29 at-bats lately, whatever it was. I can't remember. I think it was the last 2 weeks. So he hasn't been great hitting and a bad start. He's got a 6.93 ERA in 6 starts in Double A. He is a very raw pitcher, has a lot to work on to go from being a two-way player in college that was more of a reliever to actually stretched out and being a starting pitcher that can do it once a week. So he's a project, but a project with really good stuff. Hopefully he can figure it out. Meanwhile, Brandon Sproat, who is clearly the Mets' top pitching prospect right now, not named Christian Scott, he had a bad start this week. 4 earned runs, but he did get through 6, struck out just 2. That was only his second start all season where he allowed more than 1 earned run, and the other one he allowed 3. So he's had 2 lackluster starts, a lot of really good ones. I would not be worried at all about Brandon Sproat. All right, high A. Jonah Tong had a good start. 5 innings pitched, 1 hit allowed, walked 3, struck out 7. His ERA is 3.68 in 9 starts in high A. If you remember, Jonah Tong set the world on fire in Port St. Lucie this year, where he did not allow a run and struck out like 2 batters per inning. I exaggerated that maybe a touch, but not much. I mean, it was an insane strikeout rate. Now at a level that is a lot more challenging. He's still, was he 20 years old, I think? 19 or 20. But he's starting to figure some things out, and it's good that he had some struggles. He's actually 21 years old. I was making him a little bit younger there. He turned 21. I just turned 21 this past week. Man, did Jonah Tong light the city on fire in Brooklyn? I wonder what he did. Who knows? These guys are so crazy about baseball. Probably not. But hey, happy 21st birthday to Jonah Tong. It was on Wednesday, the 19th. All right. Now we got Cade Morris to talk about, also in high A. Had a quality start, 6 innings pitched, allowed 2 runs on 3 hits, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts. Really good start for him. He has struggled a bit since getting promoted from St. Lucie to Brooklyn. Has a 4.85 ERA so far, and that's after his good start. But those are the 2 arms to really watch in high A right now. Beyond that, there aren't really a lot of names that are going to jump out too much. You have Joel Diaz, who had a decent start in St. Lucie this week. But overall, we'll talk about these guys as they continue to establish themselves. For now, if you look at the top pitching prospects in this farm system, it is basically Christian Scott, Brandon Sproat. And Scott's going to graduate from that list soon. Blade Tidwell, Jonah Tong. Then you still have Dom Hamill, Mike Vassell. And then you get to that group of Cade Morris, Tyler Stewart, Joander Suarez, all these other guys who are starters. Justin Jarvis has pitched well. Of course, I should mention that. I think this week it was 9 innings pitched and a couple earned runs. That was in Binghamton. He had 1 start that was pretty good, and then a relief appearance where he went 3 scoreless. So a lot of pitching in this system that we will continue to monitor throughout this season. I appreciate all of you who have tuned in to today's show. I'll be back, of course, for your Monday episode of Locked On Mets, where we will talk about whatever happened in this Cubs series and start to get ready for Yankees coming up here, Subway Series. So a lot of fun ahead. Appreciate all of you who continue to tune in. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, trying to make a push to 9,000 subs, getting real close. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out Locked On Sports Today to stay up to date for all the latest in the world of sports. You can also find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on Amazon Fire TV.